you ever wondered why those who rise to power often seem to drift away from the virtues they once claimed to uphold? Imagine a ruler, standing at the crossroads of chaos and order, their hands trembling not from fear, but from the heavy weight of impossible choices. To show mercy might invite rebellion, to act with cruelty might secure peace. This is the uneasy terrain where morality and power collide, where the lines between good and necessary blur into shadows. Niccolo Machiavelli, the Florentine thinker, often misunderstood as a prophet of tyranny, once wrote that rulers must learn how not to be good, not because they desire evil, but because the world, in its raw and ruthless nature, demands it of them. This unsettling proposition still lingers in the corridors of politics, in boardrooms, even in the quiet corners of our own personal decisions. Today, we'll reflect together on Machiavelli's doctrine of necessary evil and ask, what does it mean to lead when virtue alone is not enough? Take a breath. Let's begin this gentle exploration into the dark mirror of power, where ancient wisdom whispers uncomfortable truths, and where the most dangerous enemy may not be the tyrant outside, but the compromise within. Let's proceed. For centuries, the classical philosophers, Plato, Aristotle, and their inheritors, envisioned a world where rulers led not merely through authority, but through the force of moral excellence. In this vision, power was a vessel for virtue, a means by which leaders could reflect the highest ideals of justice, wisdom, and compassion back to their people. Plato spoke of the philosopher king, the rare soul whose love for truth elevated him above ambition and greed. Aristotle, in turn, believed that the good life, eudaimonia, could only flourish in a polity led by those who embodied reason and moderation. To these thinkers, virtue was not optional, it was the very heart of leadership. A just society could only be built upon just men. Yet Niccolo Machiavelli looked at the world as it was, not as it ought to be. Observing the violence and instability of Renaissance Italy, he came to a starkly different conclusion. In The Prince, Machiavelli does not dismiss virtue entirely, but he recasts it through the hard lens of necessity. He suggests that the ruler must learn to wield both the lion's ferocity and the fox's cunning. In his view, those who cling rigidly to moral ideals risk not only their power, but the collapse of the state itself. A man who wishes to make a profession of goodness in everything he writes must necessarily come to grief among so many who are not good. For Machiavelli, the world is a treacherous sea, and the virtuous captain who refuses to navigate its storms with pragmatism will find his ship broken upon the rocks. We might imagine a leader today, faced with an uprising or a devastating scandal. Do they tell the whole truth and risk unraveling their authority, or do they carefully craft an illusion of control for the sake of public order? This is the uncomfortable terrain Machiavelli forces us to walk. Where the classical philosophers sought to elevate the soul of the ruler toward the light of the good, Machiavelli peers into the shadows where difficult choices are made. His is a world where survival often demands actions that would scandalize the philosophers of old. And yet, is he offering us a descent into cynicism, or simply a more honest map of the harsh terrain leaders must cross? As we step further into Machiavelli's doctrine of necessary evil, the path grows darker, and the choice is heavier. For in the next breath, we will confront the heart of his unsettling argument, that sometimes, to preserve order, the prince must betray the very virtues he claims to defend. Like a surgeon's knife, cruelty, if wielded with precision, might save the body politic, but always at a cost. Let us walk carefully now into the doctrine of necessary evil itself. In the dim corridors of political power, Machiavelli introduces us to a doctrine few dare to confront openly, the doctrine of necessary evil. Within the pages of The Prince, he speaks not to dreamers or moralists, but to those who carry the burden of ruling in a world thick with treachery, ambition, and chaos. Machiavelli does not encourage cruelty for its own sake, nor does he delight in deception. Rather, he acknowledges a truth often whispered but seldom admitted aloud, that leaders, to protect the fragile fabric of order, must sometimes stain their hands with acts they would otherwise condemn. These acts, he insists, are not a reflection of a ruler's wicked heart, but of the cold demands of necessity, that ancient force which compels even the most reluctant leader to step into the shadow. Machiavelli illustrates this grim reality through the example of Cesare Borgia, the cunning and ruthless leader who, when faced with a disobedient province, appointed a cruel governor to restore order, only to later execute him publicly to win the love and loyalty of the people. Here, cruelty is precise, almost surgical. It is not random violence, but calculated severity designed to prevent greater bloodshed. Injuries, Machiavelli writes, should be inflicted all at once, for the less they are tasted, the less they offend. In this chilling wisdom, we see a philosophy that seeks to minimize harm, but accepts that some harm is unavoidable. Like a bitter medicine, these actions are administered swiftly, decisively, and without sentimentality. This doctrine challenges us deeply. In our personal lives, we may recoil at such thinking, believing ourselves safely distant from the harsh world of rulers and princes. And yet, is it truly so distant? The parent who disciplines firmly to prevent future harm, the leader who withholds painful truths to preserve social harmony. These are echoes, however small, of Machiavelli's necessary evil. It is a reminder that life, in both its grand and intimate arenas, often demands from us a delicate balancing act between the ideal and the possible. To lead, in any domain, is to walk a path where moral clarity is often blurred by circumstance. But Machiavelli's prince does not stop with cruel actions alone, for the path of survival is not only paved with necessary harm, it is also cloaked in appearances and deception. In the next breath, we descend deeper into the art of masks and illusions, where the prince must learn to become a master of shadows, hiding necessity behind the veil of virtue. The theater of power awaits, and the actors must perform carefully upon its treacherous stage. Let us now lift the curtain on this next act. For Machiavelli, the world of politics is not a stage for sincerity, but a theater where appearances hold more weight than inner virtue. In The Prince, he argues that it is not necessary for a ruler to possess all the noble qualities we admire, mercy, honesty, integrity, but it is essential that they appear to possess them. Men judge generally more by the eye than by the hand, Machiavelli writes, for while deeds may be hidden, appearances are always on display. In this, he unveils a profound psychological insight. Human beings are drawn to symbols, to performances of goodness, more readily than to the often messy and uncomfortable truths that lie beneath. It is through the careful crafting of image, not the raw substance of character, that rulers maintain their hold over the hearts and minds of their subjects. This manipulation of perception is not limited to the realms of ancient courts or modern politics. It weaves itself quietly into our daily life. We see it in the carefully curated worlds of social media, where individuals construct versions of themselves that highlight virtue, success, and happiness, while concealing struggle and imperfection. We see it in leaders who cloak self-interest in the language of public service, in corporations that present ethical facades while engaging in questionable practices behind closed doors. These are not anomalies. They are, as Machiavelli suggests, reflections of a deeper truth about the human condition, that we often prefer the comfort of illusion to the discomfort of reality. Yet, Machiavelli does not present this as an invitation to cynicism, but as a necessary lesson for those who wish to navigate power without being consumed by it. The ruler, like the fox, must be agile in deceit, knowing when to conceal, when to reveal, and when to charm the audience into belief. But beneath this artful performance lies a haunting question. If leadership demands constant manipulation of appearances, what becomes of the ruler's own sense of self? Does the mask eventually fuse with the face? Do we, in playing roles to meet the expectations of others, lose sight of our own authentic core? This is the silent burden Machiavelli's prince carries, a life lived behind masks, always watching, always performing. And as we drift deeper into this labyrinth of strategy and survival, we must now confront the most delicate and dangerous terrain of all, the razor's edge where the ends are used to justify the means. In this space, the prince must weigh not only how to appear good, but when to do evil for the sake of good. Let us step carefully now, for this is the place where even the noblest intentions may leave the darkest stains. If these reflections are sparking thoughts within you, I welcome you to share your own insights or questions in the comments below. This space is for thoughtful conversations, and your voice is part of that journey. Let's continue. At the very heart of Machiavelli's unsettling philosophy lies the thorny question that has haunted rulers, philosophers, and ordinary people for centuries. Can the end ever justify the means? For Machiavelli, the answer leans toward a reluctant yes, but with nuance and care. In The Prince, he argues that the preservation of the state, the maintenance of order, and the safeguarding of the people sometimes require actions that would, under other circumstances, be deemed immoral or cruel. The ruler must measure not his deeds in isolation but in light of their outcomes. If deception, coercion, or violence secures peace, stability, and the well-being of the many, then such acts, while distasteful, become not only acceptable but necessary. Machiavelli's stance stands in stark contrast to thinkers like Immanuel Kant, who centuries later would insist that moral acts must be judged by the purity of their intention, not by their consequences. For Kant, to use others as mere means to an end is a violation of their inherent dignity. But Machiavelli, ever the realist, would likely respond that such idealism leaves rulers vulnerable in a world that seldom rewards virtue when it is unguarded. History itself offers countless examples to support his view. The harsh, often ruthless measures taken by leaders during times of war, plague, or civil unrest, though morally troubling, have sometimes prevented greater catastrophes. The leader who hesitates in the face of hard choices may find not only his own position undone, but the very society he sought to protect consumed by chaos. Yet, this path is never without consequence. For the leader, the repeated use of necessary evil, even when justified by noble ends, exacts a hidden toll. The line between action and justification can blur until what was once necessity becomes habit, and what was once a reluctant choice becomes a convenient tool. In this sense, Machiavelli warns of a delicate balance. A ruler must act decisively, but never lose sight of the price his soul may pay for each compromise made in the name of stability. The danger is not only that the means corrupt the leader, but that the people, observing such methods, grow cynical, distrustful, and fearful, eroding the very foundations of the ruler's legitimacy. And so, the prince walks a narrow bridge over a dark abyss, balancing the fragile weight of intention against the winds of necessity. As we move forward, we find ourselves staring into the modern mirror, where Machiavelli's old lessons still whisper in the shadows of contemporary politics and leadership. Are his doctrines relics of a ruthless past, or do they still pulse beneath the surface of today's polished speeches and smiling faces? Let us pause, and with gentle curiosity, step into this reflection. The world may have changed, but perhaps the heart of power has not. Centuries have passed since Machiavelli penned The Prince, yet his voice echoes like a persistent whisper through the corridors of modern power. Though the trappings of leadership have evolved, suits and speeches have replaced crowns and swords, the fundamental dilemmas remain eerily unchanged. Leaders today, much like those in Machiavelli's time, still wrestle with the delicate dance between morality and survival, appearance and substance, truth and necessary deception. The platforms may now be global stages, the audiences millions, yet the script beneath the spectacle often feels remarkably familiar. Consider the quiet language of diplomacy, where behind closed doors, compromises are made that never see the public eye, or the carefully crafted narratives of corporate leaders, shaping stories that protect brand image while masking uncomfortable truths. Even in our personal lives, the Machiavellian dilemma persists in subtle form. How often do we find ourselves curating our image, presenting a polished version of our lives to the world while concealing the vulnerabilities and shadows within? Machiavelli's insights stretch beyond politics. They are, in many ways, reflections of the human condition itself, with all its complexities, contradictions, and quiet acts of survival. Yet the question lingers: must we accept Machiavelli's vision as an eternal truth, or can we, with awareness and reflection, carve a more compassionate path? Perhaps the enduring value of Machiavelli is not in the acceptance of necessary evil, but in the invitation to see the world with sober eyes, to recognize the forces at play, and to choose, when we can, to resist them. For even in a world that rewards cunning, there remains a space for integrity, for those rare leaders and individuals who dare to act rightly, not because it is easy, but because it is necessary for the dignity of the soul. And so, as we approach the final moments of this journey, we are left with a quiet reckoning. Machiavelli has shown us the darkness that clings to power, but the reflection he offers is not only of rulers, but of ourselves. The mirror remains before us, polished yet unforgiving, asking not only how we judge our leaders, but how we lead our own lives. Let us now gather these reflections gently, as we draw toward a closing meditation on the fragile balance between power, virtue, and the hidden costs they exact upon the human spirit. And so, we arrive at the quiet end of our journey through Machiavelli's world, a world of necessary evils, fragile masks and rulers, caught between the demands of power and the longing for virtue. Along the way, we have walked alongside princes and philosophers, pausing at the uneasy crossroads where ethics and survival collide. We have seen how Machiavelli held up a dark mirror, not only to leaders but to all of us, reflecting the uncomfortable truth that the world is often not as it should be, but as it is, unpredictable, cruel, and complex. Yet perhaps the deepest gift of this exploration is not in embracing cynicism, but in seeing clearly. Machiavelli does not invite us to abandon virtue, but to understand that in the storms of life, virtue alone may not steady the ship. This does not mean we surrender to despair. Instead, it asks us to move forward with eyes wide open, aware of the shadows, yet still seeking the light where we can find it. In this awareness, there is a kind of freedom. The freedom to choose when to resist, when to adapt, and when to hold fast to the values that nourish our spirit, even when the world tempts us otherwise. As we close, I invite you to return to the question we began with: can we lead or live without compromising what we hold dear? Machiavelli does not give us easy answers, but perhaps that is the point. The hardest questions are the ones we must sit with quietly, patiently, allowing them to deepen us rather than rush to resolve them. And in that stillness, we may find that while the world demands masks and strategies, our truest power lies in remembering the face beneath the mask, the part of us that still hopes, still cares, still dares to imagine a gentler way. Thank you for reflecting with me today. If this journey stirred something in you, feel free to join our community by subscribing or sharing your thoughts below. Together, we can continue exploring these quiet, important questions.